So we got Josh Bates on today, a former infantry officer, intel officer. I know Josh. I got to serve with him in 1-7 for the invasion, and I told him this before, and it's not for the podcast. Josh, by far, is one of the best officers I ever served with, one of the best Marines, and just an all-around awesome guy. We're going to be talking today about everything. Coming into the Marines, moving into intel, all that stuff, and being a published author now. Besides just being an all-around great guy. Are you still surfing though? That's a big question though we got to ask.
Oh, you know it, brother. That's my whole purpose for paying the exorbitant mortgage to live out here in Hawaii, is that I can still surf, 4 or 5 times a week.
You always used to say, I'm going down to San Diego this week. I'm going surfing.
Nice.
When we got back from Iraq, that's every week. It's like, I'm out of here. I'm going surfing.
Oh yeah. That was for sure. That was the plan. That was being stationed in 29 Palms. That was kind of my cross to bear. Like, you're just gonna make that 34-hour trip every weekend. No worries.
We have plenty of sand, but no water.
Damn right. All right, Josh. Just kind of intro. It's kind of what we do on the show. Just a summary of where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up?
Yeah. So my pops is a Marine, and so I was kind of born into it, right? So I was actually born at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital and grew up in Oceanside, so right outside Camp Pendleton there in northern San Diego County. So obviously, we moved around a lot, but Hawaii was like all my formative years were here. So grade school, middle school. We actually went back to Virginia for my first couple of years of high school, and then I came back in 11th grade, finished up here. So yeah, Pops was able to kind of homestead between all the different Marine infantry. Well, he was a machine gunner in Vietnam, and then he got wounded a bunch. Was actually medically retired for about 8 years. And then met my mom while he was going to school in the GI Bill. They got married. Had me a few years later. He came back in the Marine Corps as an officer, and then so I grew up kind of around the gig, as it were, and moved around a bunch, but mostly, and I thank him for this, he took a lot of assignments in Hawaii and in the West Coast. Didn't have to do too many East Coast winters. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously I had a lot of exposure to it, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, when it came time to figure out what I was going to do after that, I was actually skateboarding down Kapiolani Boulevard in like downtown Honolulu. So the Marine Recruiter's office is still down there, right? Mm-hmm. So I cruised in, like punk rock kid with crazy hair and skateboard, like master lock around my neck and everything. And I never will forget the guy, Sergeant Tomaselli was the recruiter there. And, he kind of, you hear all the horror stories about recruiters. And I'm sure like, with your kid going through, you probably heard some of that on the back end as well. But I have to say, I was really lucky. I don't know if he'd already made quota that month or whatever, but like, he talked to me and he was like, well, hey, are you thinking about maybe college? And I was like, yeah, actually. And he's like, well, there's this thing called the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps Scholarship, right? And so he kind of pushed me over to the Officer Selection Office, which is like, does the recruiting for officer candidates. And sure enough, I applied for the scholarship and got it. I think a part of that was not because of like any kind of like stellar high school grades or anything, but Hawaii is in the same like region at that time with like Guam and Okinawa and all. So there were just not a lot of applicants, right, from us. So I think your chances of getting the scholarship are probably higher coming out of Honolulu. So I did, and I got it. And then you can basically, you can pretty much go to any school that you can get into that's within kind of like traveling distance of the Naval Reserve Officer Training, the NROTC unit, right? Mm-hmm. So I had already applied to University of San Diego, and that's where the consortium unit for all the San Diego schools is located. So San Diego State, Point Loma Nazarene, I think even now like UCSD and Cal State San Marcos, like all those schools went, to that unit. So that was good. So, it's like that's a really like Gucci university. There's no way I could have afforded going to that, like not on scholarship. Yeah. So those were obviously good times. And then, yeah, straight into the Marine Corps, like, right. We went to, well, actually you're supposed to go to officer candidate school the summer between your junior and senior year. Mm-hmm. I got in some trouble my junior year for like a series of alcohol related incidents, as one does. I wasn't 21 yet. So I got actually put on leave of absence. So I didn't actually go. I missed my graduation from USD because they kicked me back a year. So like, I graduated in 4 years, but instead of going to the graduation ceremony, I was like hauling ass across country to go to Quantico, Virginia to go to OCS. So did that.
I'd say this guy's a great officer, and then now I find out about all this bad stuff he did.
Well, it's all about being first, right? So I think I still hold the record for most midshipman review boards. I think I had 3 of them while I was at USD without getting kicked out. So leave of absence that stung because I had to pay back that semester financially, which was not fun. But anyway, all that happened. So yeah, then on to the basic school, and then yeah, infantry was my first choice. I didn't even really know. You know, my dad was an infantry guy. I didn't really know there was like, I knew there was other MOSs, but I just never really considered any of that stuff, like all the intel things and everything. Like that was just completely foreign to me at that point. I was like, yeah, you're either like infantry, artillery, tanks, or like some sort of pilot. Anything beyond that, like whatever, you know. So yeah, got infantry, and I think Adam he could probably attest to this. There's a lot of guys that say they want infantry going in until they've been in the field for a little while, and then that kind of thins the herd, right? And then it's like, well, maybe I will want to do this other gig for a while, and then especially because I was in a basic school company that had a bunch of prior enlisted Marines who were prior grunts, right? So these guys were like, you know, sergeants, staff sergeants that had been somewhere between like 6 to 10 years in the infantry, and they're like, infantry years are like dog years, right? So like that's basically like, biologically that's like, you know, 30-40 years of your life. So they're all like physically busted up and everything. So I was like, I didn't have to compete as hard in that sense because all those guys were like, no way I'm going back to the grunts. Like I'm just not doing it.
You know,
So
it's Josh,
that helped.
that's like completely almost like mine. I remember because I went to Charlie Company TBS
Okay.
and it was the summer, and you know you're in the field the whole time. And remember O&D week, which
Yeah.
is just, and it rained the whole time. And I remember I was playing with like artillery or infantry, and I come out of O&D week. I'm soaked. I had the same camis on for the whole week, and I go to my SPC. He's Brigadier General Pretty now. He's Captain Pretty then.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and I'm like, hey, sir, I'm going to change my MOS. And he's like, oh, I got you there. Like we had a good, we really got along with him. And remember because you were there, we were using the index cards. Remember you wrote
Yep.
like you
Yep.
had to write, Tyler, on index cards like 22 or 23 MOSs or something like that. So I put like 22, and this from 1 to 22 was infantry. He goes, okay. All right, I like this. But like I had the opposite there with like a lot of my buddies that I went through were all prior grunts, and they all went back to the grunts, which was
Oh,
funny.
that is interesting. Yeah, like, see, I think a lot of the guys I went through were like old, like a lot of them were like staff NCOs, right? So they had been in the game a long time, and I just don't think their bodies like were, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of them were like, they were like Desert Storm veterans and stuff. That had been, you know, so
Oh,
they're
okay.
guys that had done that and
Yeah.
deployed, so they've been in like a long time, yeah.
Yeah, and
And
they
I think that was just sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, they probably want pilots or something like that. That's what a lot of grunts
Yeah,
do.
yeah. A lot of them got the guaranteed aviation contract, so they didn't have to compete for their specialty.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of them were pilots. So yeah, so I think that my SBC told me like, I think 3 months, maybe 2.5, 3 months into it. He's like, yeah, don't worry. He's like, you'll get infantry if that's what you want.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I did that, and then I went right to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. You know, we did some. So I got there. I was literally on leave after infantry officer course before checking in at 17. That's when 9/11 happened. So I was actually out here in Hawaii hanging out surfing. 9/11 happened. Took me a while. I actually had to extend my leave because there was no flights. You know, I couldn't get back to California to check in. But eventually did. Then, you know, so all of 2001, the rest of that year, we were just like in the field. I don't remember doing combined arms exercise. I think we did like 2 of those, or so. I don't know. It was crazy, but like we were just in the
We
field the
were
whole time. I should have had my mail delivered out to the. I mean, you know, I had a house technically, but there was like, I was never there. Then early 2002, we deployed to Okinawa and did the whole unit deployment program thing, which is where you're training with all the other Northeast Asian militaries and stuff. So spent some time in Korea, the DMZ, all that. Came back, but what was good about that is we had a really tight crew, right? So like we had already, like most of our battalion from like the kind of senior NCO ranks on up, were all on that unit deployment program together. So then we came back, everybody kind of been working together for about a year. So we were really cohesive and tight and whatnot. We lost a few guys that were senior because they had to rotate out to go do different billets. And that's why we had some shortages down at the platoon level. And then Adam, that's how you got to come over, right? To go back to being a platoon commander as a senior first lieutenant, which had to be awesome.
I told Tyler that because because that's what happened with 3-4. I was in Oki for 9/11, and then you guys relieved us. And you know, and it was like, I think from like that time we got back in February 22 till like January of 2003, 2002 to 2003, lived in the field. That's all we did. I mean, we probably ran 400 like 3 or 4 times. And I remember it was like January, and we just got a lieutenant drop in December of like 8 lieutenants, and I'm like, oh shit, where am I going? And the Captain Norton, I think he just retired as a colonel. He's like, yeah, you're going to go to the 3 shop. You're going to be like the 3 Zulu, because there was like 2 other guys. There was Tony Johnston and Nick Westman were there, and then Rick Nee. So there was 4 lieutenants in the 3 shop, and then like I saw remember Kendrick Neal?
Yeah. Scout
Him
sniper platoon. Yeah.
See him at the PX. I'm getting coffee. Remember the little coffee shop there, right there at the PX? And he's like, "Oh, I heard you come at a 1-7." I'm like, "What? What the fuck are you talking about?" So I go back and Eric Gentrick was the our adjutant, great guy. I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "Yeah, hold on a minute." And he runs out and goes talk to Matt Baker, who's the XO, and then Baker brings me in with Colonel McCoy. I'm like, and like Josh was saying, like how you guys jammed, like I was like really tight with that unit. He's like, I'm like, am I going to 170? And Colonel McCoy's like, yes. I go, hey sir, permission to speak freely. He's like, yeah. I go, this fucking sucks. And I was just like, but I got to be a platoon commander again. And, I got to meet guys like Josh and Bruce and Ryan, like really everybody, Mark Clay, Jimmy Birchfield. And like, they welcomed me in. It was it wasn't like I was like a second lieutenant right out of infantry officers course. It was a welcoming group. It was tough at first because I didn't know these guys, but they're like, hey man, listen, you're one of us now. So I was like, so that's how it
that's
was.
awesome. And being able to go back, I mean, a lot of people out there in podcast land, they're listening or whatever. As a first lieutenant, you were like a fairly senior first lieutenant too. Get to go back to be like a rifle platoon commander at that time. That's like the best thing ever because you're just like you actually know what the hell you're doing. It takes a while. So
yeah, it takes a couple of years. I was a rifle platoon commander, and then I was a company XO. And then I remember I was sitting there with Staff Sergeant Disbrow. I think he retired as a gunny. And we're in Kuwait, and we're training, and I'm like, holy shit, I really did learn stuff as an XO. I'm watching like the platoons move, and I'm like, no, you guys got to fix that. I remember, I'm like, shit, I did learn something.
I learned something.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That was good times. Yeah. And
that was your experience in the infantry side? Sorry.
Yeah, and that's that. So really, that deployment during the invasion there in 03, and that's really the events that kind of inspired the book, right? So Baghdad Shuffle is that the first act of it that takes place in Iraq is all kind of loosely based on different episodes that happened there, and then obviously dramatized, and the chronology is monkeyed with a little bit to make it work as a more kind of cohesive narrative. But I needed something that was going to drive the story back to LA, back to California. So yeah, that was my time in the infantry. And then I actually got out of the Marine Corps when we came back. And the plan was, I was going to be a cop. So I applied to LAPD. I got the conditional acceptance and everything. And my ex-wife, who I was married to at the time, was an FBI agent. I thought she was going to get stationed in the LA field office. So it was going to work. She ended up going up north. So we were up in the Bay Area. I had to take a corporate gig. We were just trying to kind of like make ends meet and get established, and then ended up I was still in the reserves, and that's actually when I cross-decked over to the intel side. And then all the guys that I had gone to intel school with as a reservist, they were all mobilizing to go back, and this is in like late 2005, early 2006, or like February 2006. I was like, well, I want to go too. So
I'm ready to go.
we all went to Fallujah, and
interesting.
Yeah, and so that was my first deployment as an intel guy. I wasn't a CI humaner yet. I hadn't gone to CI human school. I was just like kind of a general, what we call a Marine Air Ground Task Force MAGTF intelligence officer. But got to work some really, really cool, kind of more on the analytical side. I wasn't out, running and gunning on the streets very much really at all, that deployment. Just from kind of the behind the green door type thing, I got to see kind of how big intel works at a really granular level, which was good for a guy that was, I graduated intel school in like October of 2005, and then I was a serving intelligence officer in Fallujah, 5 months later, 6 months later, whatever. So.
Can you describe Fallujah to me? Because I've only ever seen movie references, brief things that I've read, and I think one documentary, and it just seems like, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like a hellhole, completely dangerous. Everyone's dying all around you all the time, and I'm like, it can't like really be like that. But I have no idea, and I saw that you had lived over or served/lived over there from your perspective.
Yeah, so Fallujah itself, I hardly saw any of it, right? I was basically just working inside like a Windows box. Like there was a couple gigs that took me out to Ramadi, which is a little further west. Now that place looked like Stalingrad in 42 or whatever. I mean, that place really was like what you picture of just like war torn in Iraq. Like that was that. And the first time going out there, so I actually got to go on like a patrol out there, and it was funny because like good buddy of mine, Ray Gerber, who just retired as a colonel, but anyway, he was the battalion intel officer for the battalion that was there in Ramadi, and he basically, I didn't even have, as an intel guy, I had like a 9mm. I didn't have a rifle, right? So I was gonna go out on patrol with these guys because we were tracking. It was some black market fuel things that I thought we may have a line on these dudes, whatever. And so convinced them like, hey, I'm not just some like intel pogue off the street. Like I've actually, I was an infantry guy beforehand. I'm not gonna get anybody killed. Like. So they were really cool. Let me go. And Ray actually like lent me all his gear, his MVGs, his rifle, like all that stuff. So Ray, if you're listening, thanks brother for not letting me go out there with just the Neener. That would have been bad news. So I did get to see Ramadi a little bit on that, but Fallujah, yeah, for the most part, it was just flying over it in helicopters and a couple times convoying through real quick. But other than that, I was just stuck inside this like in the skiff, right in the where all the intel work goes down. So that was didn't get to see much of it.
Which, for those who've never been in a skiff, it's fucking awful. They take your phone, they take your laptop, they take your smartwatch if you have one. I don't know if you guys had those back then. And you literally sit there and you only can watch what they have for you. So it's usually maybe, for the law enforcement side, it's like 2 or 3 channels, which is Fox News, CNN, and you might get lucky and have a sports channel if you got a good boss. And that's about it. And I would do 12-hour shifts in that fucking thing. So I commiserate with you.
Well, I got to see. So, Josh, my last thing before I got out, I was on orders at NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence. I got a gig there. I went down there and that whole building's the skiff, dude. It's all windows. It's awesome. It's like the hidden secret in the intel world, because they have it set up where there's white noise generating, and it's like you're in a regular office building. Like, I mean, you can't have your phone and everything, but like it's like you can go out and talk about intelligence stuff in the hallway, and look out the window and stuff like that. It was the coolest thing.
They've come a long way for sure.
Yeah.
The good news about being the intel weenie stuck in the skiff like when you're in Iraq or Afghanistan is it was usually like the one hardened structure that was like probably like the nicest or most structurally sound one they had. So you probably had like AC and whatnot. It wasn't all bad.
Fair enough.
But it was it was definitely not the glory days of like running the streets of Baghdad like we did back in 03 or Najaf or wherever. I'm
still sweating from there. Hey,
so go ahead. Go ahead, Adam, and then I want to jump in. Go ahead.
So, Josh, I wanted, I always knew you were an intel guy. I never knew you switched over to do counter intel. I always thought that was basically you got that out of TBS and then you did it for a little bit as a lieutenant. And then how'd you finagle that?
So, well, one, I was reservist, and in the reserves, pretty much anything is possible. But they did do one time. So I think what was happening was a lot of the CI HUMINT officers, the O204s that were, coming out of TBS as O204s, in that time frame, still kind of like early to mid GWAT, they were losing a lot of those guys after their first pump, right? So they would do their hitch and then they would bounce out to go do, other intel community gigs. Yeah. They were leaving the Marine Corps. So they had basically not enough guys at the captain level to fill that. So the Marine Corps did this thing where they just took, if you were already an intel guy, they kind of comb through the personnel files or whatever. The guy that was the G2X, the staff CI HUMINT officer for 1MEF, kind of just approached me one day and was just like, hey, is this something you'd be interested in doing? And I'd already put my return to active duty package in. So I was like, hell yeah, man. Let's do this. So yeah, I got lucky. It was like a class of, I think maybe we had 20 or something. And it was like a one kill deal where the Marine Corps was just like, we're just going to take these guys that are captains. I think we had maybe 1 or 2 majors, and we're going to put them through CI HUMINT school. And then that's what I ended up doing. The rest of my return to active duty package got approved. They said, yeah, you already missed your company command window as an infantry guy. So coming back on, you should definitely stay an intel guy. And because I had the CI HUMINT training, I got to kind of work my bolt, and I just basically did CI HUMINT billets the rest of my career.
That's awesome, bro. That's money.
It was just right place, right time. Yeah. I wish I could say it was part of some grand design. I got one over on Marine Corps, Manning. No, that's not it at all. It was just,
man, you did a victory for all of us, because you always, everybody, like you said, everybody does CI stuff as a lieutenant, and usually it's the top guy who wants intel at TBS, but then you broke the matrix, bro. You lived.
I was just like, yeah, I can. I was divorced at that point, so I, fresh back from a deployment, I was like, yeah, I can go. Let's do this.
Nice.
That's kind of the main theme in the military, right? Is especially in the Marine Corps, if you're the guy that says yes and is willing to volunteer, you can do a lot of cool shit.
So when did you come back on active duty then?
So it took, I had been, so I got out in 04. I did a corporate thing for about a year, not even a full year. Then I was basically on I think they called them ADOS or active duty special or ADSW. I was in uniform every day. I was in an active reservist, put in my package. And then it wasn't until 2008 that it actually got approved, where I was notating back, so I lost a little bit of time for like retirement and everything, even though I'd stayed in uniform and it even deployed during that interim. So technically I was like, for 4 years I was a reservist. And I always joke that that's why I can make jokes about reservists, like in the book,
Nice.
like they're on the rungs of human evolution. It's like place kickers, gingers, and then reservists down at the bottom.
Hey! I was and like I activated a bunch as a reservist. So like, but I know what
Yes.
Josh is saying. Like
I said, it's the only way I can get away with it is because I was one too, right?
Yeah.
And I was that guy.
every active duty guys when we came in, there wasn't reserve officers. Like you had to do active duty time, then you could go to the reserves. Now you guys can come right in and be a reserve officer. And but like, people be like, oh, reservist. I remember being at like 29 Palms, remember the summer, and like the infantry units be coming out for CACs and be like, who stay away from them, man. They have like fungus or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely, obviously there's ones out there that are super high speed and good to go, and workers, the guys that are actually contributing to the mission, so guys and girls. But it's still fun. That's just part of the internal hierarchical bullshit that we always, there's always gonna be that in the Marine Corps. So it's fun to tweak them a little bit, and I feel like I can get away with it because I was a nasty reservist for 4 years.
Nice. When did you retire? 22?
22, yeah. So like I say, getting out, I had the split time, so it bumped my retirement back a little bit. Yeah, well, my last day before terminal leave was the end of 21, and then early 22, I punched. So.
Did you start doing anything when you retired, or were you just like went back to Hawaii and started surfing?
I had because remember, like when we came in, it was when we got the transfer to post 9/11 GI Bill. So yeah, I went back to school for GI
nice.
Bill. I tell you what, man, getting your housing allowance in Hawaii, because when you're on GI Bill, you get E5 housing allowance month, which is like, for me, it was because I went to Hawaii Pacific University, right? So I had to take advantage of that. I don't have any kids to pass it on to or anything. So I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to jump on that. So I did a Diplomacy and Military Studies Master's at Hawaii Pacific, which was really cool because they gave me a lot of kind of leeway for my thesis, which actually focused on mostly U.S. Army, but domestic military intelligence operations, like within the United States, right? And there's a lot of misconceptions about that. But especially, and it focused back on kind of like civil rights era and anti-war movement stuff. So it was basically 65 to 75 up until like the Church Pike IC reorganization, talking about how, military intelligence worked with both not only like the broader intel community, but also with like municipal and local police departments, sheriffs, etc., to basically conduct domestic intelligence. So, and a lot of people get, it was kind of like the topic du jour. I started that research right after January 6th. There was like a lot of kind of interest at the time in the media. And so never got it actually published, but it's finished. It's out there.
Nice,
but
right.
there's some really interesting episodes from that area. Like people don't realize like how invested and pervasive, especially the Army through USAC, through their intel command there, like how deep into the fabric of American social life Army intelligence was embedded back in those days, and actively collecting on U.S. citizens, and surprisingly not always in violation of the existing laws and statutes. So everybody talks about posse comitatus and like how that but there's a lot of workarounds, and a lot of that legislation wasn't as tight as it is now. So there was a bunch of that stuff going on back then.
That's pretty cool, man. That's
so it was fun. I got to study that for a year and a half.
Have you done or what are you doing, like consulting now and stuff like that a little bit, or just is it just?
Well, right now I'm just doing pretty much just the writing thing. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
that's what I'm trying to make. Like I say, we were talking earlier, always marry up. So as my wife says, she's not quite the sugar mama, but she's like a Splenda mama. So that which is good. And then she's actually she just finished a novel as well, so she's starting to go into like the heavy editing phase on that one, and it's kind of the I'm probably gonna get this tagline wrong, or she'd probably kill me for like misrepresentation, but it's kind of like a Sex in the City within the Navy Nurse Corps.
Ooh.
So so like I say, it's got way better commercial appeal than anything I'm gonna write, right? So I was like, this is the one that we're banking on.
And definitely, like, military guys are going to be like, I got to check this one out,
Oh, for sure. Well, because it's like, it's hard for, a lot of like professional military women, especially in the officer corps, like their kind of dating and personal relationship aperture is like very narrow, right? Because they're deploying all the time. They're around only other military people most of the time. It's not like the kind of the normal social scene. So there is a lot of material there.
So,
like grossly simplifying kind of the the nuance of her book, but that's the kind of the general vibe. So I was like, yeah, that thing definitely, like I say, has much broader commercial appeal than, you know, writing about all kinds of criminal capers going down in Baghdad in 2003.
What was it like transitioning from infantry to intel? Because I know it's funny just listening to my son, because when he was going through boot camp and the combat training for a month, they're like, "Oh, you're intel." And most, even within the Marine Corps, they're like, "I have no idea what you guys do. You guys do secret scrolls." It was basically just like, "I have no idea."
Yeah, you are kind of segregated from the rest of the operation force a lot because of security, you know, classification issues and whatever. You don't necessarily, you're not working in the same spaces and whatnot. And then also I don't have the numbers to back this up, but at least anecdotally, like Marine Intel folks fill a lot more of the joint billet requirements. So working, you know, either interagency or other joint commands than other MOSs, other military specialties would, at least as a ratio of how many people there are, right? So, I mean, you know, Intel's small, but there's a lot of that stuff that's picked up there. So yeah, it's a little bit different track, and it took a little bit of adjustment for me to get to. Fortunately, I think it happened it was at the right time of my life, right? So, I kind of gotten the wiggles out, so to speak, in the infantry side. I got some nagging, like injury, you know, just stupid things, not taking care of yourself, not, you know, not paying attention to any kind of health or nutrition or sleep cycle or nothing that.
Being a typical grunt.
Yeah, exactly. Just completely powered on nicotine and caffeine and booze. If we weren't in, you know, there you go. And definitely some heavy alcohol dependency when we weren't in the Middle East. So yeah. So it was good. It was a kind of a natural. It was good. It was a good time for me to transition. Good point of my career to do it.
But to your point, we're going to jump around a little bit. I just want to understand. So when you got out of the infantry and you were in the reserve, you were in LA, and then you went back in Intel, was that the time period when you were you said you were signing with LAPD, but you didn't get it, or you did some ride-along, sabotage some interviews? We're just going to kind of go back and forth a little bit.
It was, there's actually some funny stories, and probably, you know, and looking back on it, thank God at that point, coming back from that first deployment, I was not hired to be police, and like I had the absolute wrong mentality for it, right? Like it would have been bad news bears. I'd probably be in jail now or caused some sort of scandal. But anyway, so the LAPD one went pretty well. They gave me the conditional letter of acceptance, but like I said, that's when I ended up moving back up to Northern California. So then I was up there, and I'll just say an unnamed department up there. I did a ride along first, right? I had kind of a family connection to get with a K9 officer up there that took me on a ride along, right? So, and again, this is like months back from, maybe 6-7 months back from that deployment in Iraq, right? I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps or whatever, maybe 10 months, I don't know. But get with him, and then right out the gate, right? Like I'm, you know, riding along, got the K9 in the back. He's like, watch this. See this tweaker on the bike over here? I'm going to jam this guy up. And I was like, you know,
okay.
I'm not judging here. Like, do you need probable cause or anything? And he's like, well, yeah, you watched him make that turn without an arm signal, right? I was just like, so anyway, so he goes up, right, gives this guy the bum rush, and I'm just like, damn, these guys aren't playing, right? Like he's in charge of, he's got this beat locked down. Like basically, don't ever let me catch you back here again, that kind of thing. 2 minutes later, we get back in the car. 2 minutes later, they get a call, and the marshals have a beat on some fugitive that's like they're in his beat somewhere, and they want local, you know, support to go snatch this guy. So I was like, cool, you know, we go. They're pulling a Burger King parking lot, quick like map on the hood, go through their plan or whatever. We get there, we park on the perimeter. He's like, hey, I know you're just back from Iraq. He's like, I can't have you in the stack. Like, you can't come into the house with us. He's like, but he left the trunk open with the shotgun in there. He's like, this is a bad neighborhood. Anybody tries to jack the ride, you know, keep them back.
Yeah.
So these guys go in there, and I hear gunshot, like there's shots fired. I was like, holy shit, man, they just greased this guy like in front of. Turns out, unfortunately, it was the guy's dog. He had a pit bull. The fugitive did that he like released on him. So I felt pretty bad about that. You know, I see people get killed all the time. It doesn't bother me that much, but dogs, different story. So anyway, I was thinking like this this department is like, these guys are just kicking ass and taking names, right?
Yeah.
So then I'd already applied, so my application. So I finally go to the like written thing, right? Which is like with, I think it was like the lieutenant, one of the PAO, like public affairs officers. I think there was 3 on the board. So they started asking me scenario questions, right? So in my mind, I just done the ride along with these guys. I'm like, they're out just cracking skulls. Like that's, you know, so the very first scenario question was, you're with your training officer. You've got this like repeat offender, you know, public, you know, drunkard in the back, and he's like spitting through the cage. And so your PTO like, you know, hits the wheel real hard to slam his head against the plexiglass or whatever. He's like, what do you do? And I'm thinking, I just came off the streets with these guys. Like, they're testing my loyalty, right? They want to make sure that I'm staying true.
Oh, boy.
Shit.
So I was like, well, I started to try to like rationalize it, like, well, I mean, is this guy like a serial abuser? Is he like out there jamming up civilians all the time, or is this like a one-time thing? And I could see him like furiously taking notes. Yeah, sure enough, I got the skinny letter in the mail saying, yeah, thanks but no thanks. About a week later.
Yeah.
trying to bring the Iraq mindset into civilian law enforcement and the civil rights bastion of California. Like I say, thank God I didn't get hired at that time, because I wasn't in the right headspace for that. But
Fair enough.
hopefully a good learning lesson for other dudes out there that might be thinking about that transition.
Well, I can give you an example. So Adam and I spent 2 lovely weeks at FLETC together. Very romantic in our 70s dorm rooms with black mold. But
It's more like 1950s.
even older. Do you think you were interested or did so well in the intel side because you had that solving crime, that kind of cop mentality?
There's definitely kind of the intangibles, right? What makes people good in the intelligence game. And I'm not saying I was per se, but I always looked for the Marines that kept asking why, right? The ones that had that kind of insatiable curiosity. They were going to get to the bottom of the mystery, whatever it was, and they get obsessive about it. And that's something you can't really teach that, right? You can teach all the hard skills, like all the actual like procedural stuff. Like, yeah, no, people can learn that. But if they don't have that kind of innate drive to really get after the problem set, they're probably not going to be great. They can be proficient, but they're not going to be great in the intel game. So I think I did have some of that, and back when I was looking to get in law enforcement, I didn't care about being a detective or like working cases. Like, nah, man, I just want to be on patrol. I just want it to be like it was in Baghdad in '03, like cruising around, running and gunning. And it took me a while to realize. And then once I was finally exposed to like actual casework, I was like, man, this is a whole different level, right? And I think the other thing that kind of helped me in that respect is going into it, I didn't have any kind of like preconceived notions, so I was very teachable, right? Because I was just like the infantry guy that had very little exposure to that world. So I wasn't trying to I didn't have any bad habits to fall back on or anything really. So like I was able to absorb a lot of the intelligence training as kind of like a fresh canvas, and I think that helps, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So but then, yeah, once I was exposed to that, and then especially later on, like as a CI guy specifically, working some of the counter-espionage stuff with the FBI and NCIS, that's when I really became fascinated with kind of the ins and outs and the complexity of casework and how demanding it can be on a lot of different levels. Everything from like administratively making sure you got the discipline for all the reporting, the records keeping, and everything, and then in the interagency kabuki dance that you're always trying to do, whether it's jurisdiction or priorities for collection, whatever.
Yeah.
Making sure that that's ironed out, and that takes, I think a lot of people that are good at being police are also kind of like naturally suited for that, because the interpersonal communication skills, they know like when maybe it's to make it the other guy's idea, that inception. Like if you're trying, especially interagency, right? Like there's different competing requirements and maybe like limited assets or resources to make it happen, but we're generally both getting at the same objective, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to make it say, oh, maybe this is this other guy, that's actually his idea, and make it, make him feel like it, him or her feel like it is their idea, to get them on board. So I've seen that with a lot of, at least on the federal law enforcement side, I've seen people that have been pretty good at that. And then I think, it translates well to military intelligence as well.
What about you, Adam? Because you kind of finished off your career doing intel-ish, right? And then
well, I want to go back to I'm just thinking of Josh, because I remember I was in Baghdad with him at that time, and it was great, man. I mean, he had some Humvees, I had Amtraks and everything like that, but we're driving all over the place and everything like that. But Josh, it's not like a knock. I want to make a joke, but Josh is like, I know exactly what he's saying with the running and gunning. But Tyler, this, like he never got to the cop thing where you get like, yes, I'm going to run and gun, I'm going to arrest all these people. But there's the one thing that you don't understand when you become a cop is the evil word of paperwork.
Yes.
With everything you do, there is tons and tons and tons of paperwork.
Yes.
That's where you're like, man, that guy looks like he has a Stinger missile. I don't know. That could be a lot of paperwork I may have to do and shit like that.
For every cool thing you do is 3 days of paperwork.
Yeah, but going back to what you said, like I definitely did not do nearly as I did some like counter intel stuff when I was with state, and very, very limited intel stuff at the Marine Corps. But I know exactly what Josh is talking about. And I think that comes like definitely from the infantry side, where like, and being in the Marine Corps, it's the smallest of the services, and you don't have the much resources where you're like, hey, we gotta like, I don't know, like we gotta get zip drives. Like, all right, well, my buddy is in the Navy over there. Let me go knock on the door and ask him if we can get some. And then, like, you do that. You're like, hey, John, what's going on, man? Can I get? Yeah, absolutely. But then, like, there's like a higher up is like, whoa, 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 what's going on? You're not supposed to use Navy zip drives, and we can only use Coast Guard zip drives that were processed through Ohio and stuff like that. And when Josh said that hit the nail on the head. I just remember, like, when I was a detective in a small department in Jersey. Very, like, the pay was good, but the resources were very, very limited. So I was so used to doing, like, calling everybody and doing stuff. And I remember when I went to be a TFO with the DEA, and I started working a case with helping a buddy out. And this guy, I remember we met this guy down in Elizabeth. He wanted to be, I think he was going to be a CI or add something, but he's like, yeah, but I was a CI for the state police, for New Jersey State Police. I'm like, so I email a state trooper I know. I'm like, hey, you know so-and-so? He's like, oh yeah, my brother was his handler and stuff. So I get all the information and I tell my group supervisors, like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, no, you're supposed to go through the state police guys that are TFOs. I'm like, okay, this isn't the next 9/11. Just make the machine happy, grease the wheel, and your life is a lot better. Don't try and fight it. Josh, like, that, like, with the Marine, like, I can imagine that, like, and I saw you operate as a cat guy, and you were really, really, really fucking shit hot. Like, I can picture, like, you getting the CI and being like, all right, we can do it like this. And then, like, somebody's like, well, the FBI liaison doesn't like that. And, and then you get a guy that was straight, like an officer that was straight intel and never, like, maybe like he did, like, I was with the grunts for like 8 months as a 2 alpha or something like that, But I can picture Josh, like, and tell me if I'm wrong, that, like, where they're like, well, you gotta do the TPS reports, and then you gotta fax it and then scan it to the old PC load letter printer. It's just like,
yeah, that was well. I mean, yeah, I see it from both ways, because it's like, at the same time, leading young CI human guys too, is you got to make sure that, like, that administrative discipline is there, because it does. You do have to feed. It's not just a cooperate to graduate type thing, right? Like, you feed the machine, because that's going to create the baseline, which you can then later find the discrepancies, right? Like, if you don't have that baseline, it's not stacked with all the paperwork, you're never gonna be able to find those discrepancies and get cued into, like, what you need to track. Yeah. So I used to always joke with him. I was like, well, back in the GDR days in East Germany, if, like, the Stasi could maintain, like, an active source network of like 1 million people on 3x5 index cards, you guys have all these computers and shit. Like, there should be no excuse for you not to be able to be up to date on your contact reports, or whatever it is. But yeah, but the funny part of that is, like, switching over to the fiction side and trying to craft like a compelling narrative about that world. And there's just, like, no fun way for a reader to have to, like, again, okay, there's this really exciting, meet between, like, a handler and their source or whatever. But then, yeah, you're not going to get into writing about 7 hours of contact reports after that. Like, that's just not like
because the book would be like 853 pages. And
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't, for narrative purposes, that just doesn't really work. So it's fun to take the artistic license out of that, right? And really just kind of highlight, like, the cool, the sexy parts of the gig,
the fun stuff,
and hope, yeah, exactly, and hope everybody just understands that, like, somewhere below all that is all the
yeah, that's like, I can't wait to read it, because like the three of us have all been in that world, and, like, Josh, like, a lot of the guys like that we talked about, we both know and everything, they'll read it and, like, be like, oh, this is pretty cool, but, like, it's there in everybody's head, like, oh man, so he met with this person, but then he did this. He goes, wait a minute, he didn't go back and type his report. Did he have to do fit reps for guys under his command? That's always, like, the fun stuff you're thinking about.
Yeah. Well, there's also some stuff in there, you'll read it. So the protagonist, Jim, in the book is probably a little saltier and a little bit more worldly than most 25, 26-year-old Marine infantry first lieutenants would be. So there's some parts there where he starts to get jammed up for some potential, criminal activity by NCS and FBI, and he plays hardball with them, right? And these are, like, the fact that he would know that it's not like a custodial interrogation, like, he can just lawyer up or whatever. Like, that was kind of shit. At that age, I would have had no idea.
Yeah.
But again, because it's fiction, you can, so he has a fictional Uncle Mitch who was like a LAPD robbery homicide guy that gave him all these kind of like tidbits as he was growing up, like don't ever talk to cops without lawyers, don't, like all that kind of stuff. So it's fun being able to kind of incorporate all the, over decades of kind of being around that life. And then looking back on it is like, if I had even like a fraction of that knowledge when I was that age, how much, more badass I would have been.
Like you said, Josh, like all of us at 20, I can picture being like, as a brand new lieutenant at 25, I would definitely not be like, I need my lawyer. Like they'd bring me in here, and by the time they get out, be like, hey, so what happened? He goes, well, I was the 21st hijacker. I wear women's thongs 3 times a week and stuff like that. You're like, they're like, dude, you don't do any of that stuff. I don't know. That's what they told me, and I
Absolutely. And well, it's funny, like because I did kind of get jammed up for a quote unquote like bad shoot that also got captured by CNN, and again, not CNN's fault that there was like a weird edit of that video that was kind of leaked later on. Unfortunately, it never really got beyond like the preliminary inquiry stage, but I had some questions to answer when I got back from that deployment, and I remember like I was scared shitless. I was like, oh man, like I'm gonna get jammed up on this thing. I'm going to the brig, blah, blah. So. Yeah, the protagonist in the book, his ability to kind of play hardball with law enforcement like that is definitely, that is a work of fiction.
Yeah, but that again, that's what makes the book so good, because otherwise it'd be like, wow, this book is really great, but it's 32 pages. The protagonist got arrested. Like that's the downside. This was turning out to be great. Like, how did he know not to say lawyer?
This guy just copped to like 6 felonies. Like the book's over. Yeah, he's going to court.
I guess we'll have to wait for the sequel when he's in prison and stuff.
Military awards, Bronze Star, and then again, there's an exception with the Combat Valor Device.
Yeah, so that was from that deployment, from the invasion in 2003. It was actually the very first day of the war, so to speak.
Damn.
Yeah, so Adam will remember, like, our objective was we had to secure this gas oil separation platform in a little
Azubayar pumping station.
Yeah, the Azubayar GOSP is what they called it, right? The gas oil separation platform. And it was part of the bigger, like, Iraqi Southern oil field infrastructure thing down there. We were worried about, like, how they did back in 91, like they were going to, blow this, sabotage it, essentially, create all kinds of drama. So we rushed in there pretty fast, and then as we secured that place, we kept moving forward, and we were kind of on the outskirts of what was like the perimeter of the Iraqi 51st Mechanized Division. So they had all their, old Soviet tanks and stuff out there. And thank God they weren't really shooting at us with the main guns or like maneuvering the tanks that much. But what they were doing was they would jump up in the cupola, off a bunch of machine gun rounds, and then as we advanced on them, they'd jump out of that tank, run back, further down the line to the next tank, and shoot at us from that one, right? And I remember that was like that night, actually, the first time I'd ever seen green tracers, like shit, like what? And then come in the wrong direction. And then, so our assaultmen had some pre-made charges. So what we would do is they would just blow the tanks like as we advanced forward, right? We just, with a controlled detonation, no biggie. Then we got into like a little bit more built up area with some apartment complexes, got ambushed by some rifle and RPG fire. And then they were out of charges, and it was like not a safe place to start engaging with like tow missiles and stuff, with the anti-armor missiles that we had, just because of all the civilians around. So I had the Marines cover me and just ran up and dropped some frag grenades in the down the commander's hatch there to just destroy the tank from the inside, right? So that to be inoperable, or at least I hoped it would be. And again, that was captured on CNN, kind of filmed some of that. I think honestly, like that's why. I mean, it wasn't like I was going hand to hand with dudes like with Iraqi tankers, like prying open the commander's hatch and throwing it. It was just to make sure that like we didn't want to bypass those tanks and then have them come back and start shooting into the rear of our formation with the machine guns. But yeah, so that, and then there was a couple other like minor incidents after that they kind of wrapped up into the awards presentation or the citation.
I was looking for it. I have my map from the invasion, and I wanted to pull it from that first map with Azubar on it, and then I have my bag, but I don't know where the hell I put it now. I had it.
Yeah, I've actually got it mounted. So, well, two things. So one, I gave Pops like a Iraqi flag that we pulled from the Ba'athist headquarters right outside of Azubayar, and then I put that map underneath it, and we have it mounted. It's in my parents' house right now. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
I submitted another one, one of the 1 to 50,000s that had like all of our op terms and graphics and all that, enemy positions and all that later, to the Museum of the Marine Corps, and they accepted it. So I have not been back since they opened up the big OEF wing yet at the museum there in Quantico.
You got to go check it out, dude.
We'll have to check it, because supposedly that map is in there now, and that's for 1-7, that was like we were like quote unquote like the tip of the spear for that part of the first day of the invasion, going out to the east there into
Yeah,
towards
we
Basra.
and then made the right, and then we seized Azubar. I remember my platoon got tasked. I had to do the it was the manifold. It was the GOSP, but it was third platoon. We had to get the manifold, the pumps, and then the electrical pump house. And
Yeah.
I think I was telling Tyler on a previous podcast. I remember because we had satellite. I forgot who was our the S2 officer. I forgot his name.
It was Terra Hero, wasn't it?
Yes,
Correct?
yeah, really nice guy. And he gave us like satellite imagery, and it had like the measurements on it. So like I'm like, oh, I measured everything, and I remember like we set it up in Kuwait, and I had like from the manifold to the pump house, it's like 100 meters, and then from the pumps to the electrical pump house is like 250 meters. I was telling Tyler, we get there that day, it's like the manifold's right here, and like literally I can throw a rock at the pump house, the pumps, and then like the electrical house is like 50 feet the other way. I'm like, well, I guess the satellites really can't tell us how far everything is.
We definitely had. So there was a steep learning curve operating around all the oil facility, gear and equipment. I remember like before we left California, we had some oil engineers basically show us the schematic, and I remember like they were like, under no circumstances this feeder pipe, then just like a little, maybe like a 8 or 9 inch diameter pipe, the real skinny pipe that runs right off the ground. They're like, that's the one thing you absolutely don't want to shoot, right? So like, whatever you do. Very, very first rounds of the war for 1-7, we're like racing towards the GOSP. I'm in the in the lead truck. My gunner Bear is in the Mark 19 turret above us. This late model like Toyota Land Cruiser, which you right away, those are regime dudes, right? Like they're the only ones that have that kind of that nice a whip there in Iraq. But they come out of the kind of the facility. They see us and they U-turn hard because they're trying to get away from us. So Bear dumps a bunch of 40 Mike into the back window of that SUV, and no shit, one of the rounds like impacted the back bumper, skipped hard right, and what does it hit? That one feeder line that they told us not to.
Shit.
It's like a little mini mushroom cloud coming. I was like,
Well,
you had one job.
Do you remember the Harriers were supposed to do a flyby the morning of, and if the flame wasn't going, like that's burning off the excess chemicals, we weren't supposed to go because there could be like dangerous chemicals.
They were gonna sabotage.
I remember we get there and we attack and there's no flame, and I remember Tom LaCroix's like, he goes, well, I guess the Harriers didn't feel like calling us and telling us anything,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't honestly. I don't remember if the flame was visible or not. Like if it was still going, I think it was turned off.
Yeah,
but,
it wasn't going.
It was cold, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because
but we went anyway. I mean,
yeah, it was. The flame was.
We had nothing else to do that day.
Yeah, that was good times, man. Good times.
Yeah, the glory days for sure.
Yeah. Now we're just sitting in basements, reliving our. Yeah, but Josh, we're lucky, like you always say, like because we had very little casualties with the battalion and stuff like that. So I mean, we lucked out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just the timing of it, right? And like being a platoon commander, being a CAP platoon, combined arms anti-tank platoon commander for the invasion in 2003, that was like the best job in the Marine Corps. It was unreal. Like
I'm insanely. You definitely had by far the best job. Anybody that had a CAP platoon, which is Tyler, which is like the Humvees that has Mark 1950 cals and the Bravos, the tow systems, by far, like because that was like a legit conventional war. Like I mean, target-rich environment. T-62s, T-72s, T-55s everywhere. BMPs that's like you lived the dream perfectly with that one.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we were actually shooting dudes that were like in uniform. It was like operating way out in front of the battalion. A lot of times, like, I mean, we're doing HF shots, trying to basically stay in comms with them. So very little adult supervision, just kind of out and about. And it was, the Marines they definitely were getting some stacking buddies.
Yeah, it was you and Jimmy Birchfield, but mostly after 1 and 2, right?
Jimmy B was he was cat blue, I was cat red. So
that's all. Yeah, I remember that. You'd hear Josh, and then I remember the saying. Do you remember because my 3-4, my old unit, Josh came up with the saying. He goes, "Oh, it looks like this area was 3-4'd," because they would just go in. And
those guys, they killed between 3-4 and that detachment from First Tanks that was with them. Those dudes killed more Iraqis than cancer. Like it was out of control. I will never forget going up because Ryan Murata, our 81's platoon commander, was like out of like one's rounds or getting low or something. So I went up to 3-4. We're doing like a passage of lines right south of Baghdad, and of course they were completely Winchester. You know, they'd already fired like all their mortar rounds.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing this tank right by like where the battalion commander was, and I never will forget the tank was called Blackula, which I thought was hilarious. And it no shit had like gore.
That's awesome.
Like or dripping off the front, like blood and guts and shit, like dripping off the front, like glacial plate of the tank, because they had just rolled through this little, I think it was Diyala or like one of those little suburbs down there with that company of tanks that was with 3-4, and they had just absolutely fucked those guys up.
Yeah.
It was just like bodies all over the street, and like it was gnarly.
Josh, my buddy Matt Danner was the 81's platoon commander for 3-4. They fired so many rounds they broke a base plate.
Yeah, that's unreal.
Yeah, and he actually, like, you know, we may have to edit this out, but he actually, when they got back to California, he took that base plate. The armorer's like, no, we got it. He's like, I'm taking this. He still has that base plate. And
that's awesome.
There was a picture in time of Colonel McCoy, Brian McCoy, he was 3-4 commander, who I still talk to, still a great guy. Tyler, he is like this throwing a grenade. The battalion commander, like this throwing a grenade.
He's getting some.
Yeah. He even said it. He's in time. He's like, yeah, you know, basically what we do is we throw some chum out in the water, get the sharks around, we'll get the blood going, get the sharks around, and then we unleash the boys on them and shit like that.
Yeah, that's funny. Using 3-4 as the verb, like, so Rich Barclay, our buddy from, he became the 3-4 battalion commander a couple years back. So it was funny when he took command of that, and he still stays in touch with Colonel McCoy too, but like, we're always joking with him, be like, yeah, man, just like, statute of limitations. Like it can be your friend, I guess. Like, right?
Yeah. But I remember Josh on the radio one time. He's on battalion TAC. He's like, and I think it was Colonel Collin or I don't know if it was the OPSO. And he's like, hey, what's the situation up there? And you just hear Josh come over and goes, yeah, it looks like this area was 3-4, and that's it. Everybody knew what happened.
Any of the 3-4 vets out there, we love you guys, man. Yeah. It's all good, all good.
My heart bleeds 3-4 and 1-7 blood because I was with both of them. Like, I didn't do combat with 3-4. I did combat with 1-7, but like, it's still like, you know, I was in Afghanistan in 11 and 12. And I remember when General Allen was there and Colonel McCoy was his aide. And they're like, somebody's like, oh yeah, BP McCoy's here with General Allen. I'm like, Colonel McCoy's here? They're like, oh, you know him? I'm like, yeah, I know him. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I was a civil affairs guy, but attached to him. And I go out there and like, you know, like all the leadership's all talking to General Allen and everything. And I'm standing in the back and I'm like, I see Colonel McCoy and I'm like just do he's like talking to somebody. He stops talking and he comes up and gives me a big bear hug. And like everybody else is just looking at me like, who the fuck is this guy, you know? So
General Edwin Wheeler Award for Infantry I've never even heard of it. Can you just touch on that and then we'll dive in?
That's the from Infantry Officer School, right? So it's kind of like the grad there, and it's the cool thing about it is it's selected by your peers, right?
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't know is like I had one up on them because I did IOC almost twice. I was in it the first time. I ended up getting yeah. So I was in it in you know, right after actually we started before TBS even ended. So I was like halfway through it the first time, and I got kidney stones, and I ended up having to go up to like Bethesda or whatever, and they ended up not doing surgery, but they passed eventually. But you can only miss like one training day, I think, for injury, and if not, you get rolled. So I got rolled back. So by the time, and like the guys in that second class, it took them a few weeks to realize. They just thought like, oh man, this guy's on it. He knows like all this shit that's going on. It's like, because I had already done most of it. So I definitely had a unfair advantage.
Did you have to do, they didn't make you do the CET again, did they, or no?
No, because I had passed that the first time, so I didn't have to NDoc again. But that was funny because like I was like the guy at the end of NDoc that was taking times and stuff when people came in. And so like all the guys that ended up being my classmates in my second IOC iteration thought I was like one of the instructors or whatever. And I was like, no, man, I'm going to school with you guys. Like,
yeah, I told Tyler about that with IOC because when you and I went through IOC, remember like the CET was like, if you don't, I remember they saying if you don't pass it, you come in every Saturday and you do it until you pass it. And you know, I was never a 300 PFTer, but I remember I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm coming in on a Saturday to take this thing again. I passed it, and I never looked back at it, bro.
Yep. Yeah, that was a happy day. I passed it the first time, and it was like, you know, one of those 35 degrees and raining thing, and it's just like, man, I am stoked that I'm not doing that again.
IOC was probably is a miserable course. I went through with I got a broken rib from the House of Pain and then ground fighting, and I never told the instructors and everything. My buddies looked out for me
Oh, nice.
because
Yeah, you get me.
my buddy Bill Lombardo, who's still in, he's a full bird. He's a Marsac guy. He's like, Mac, we're gonna put you on the instead of doing the mortar hike, you go ahead and help unload the mortars. Remember the mortar appreciation hike?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that's great. Let me tell you something. I would have rather done the mortar hike because unloading mortar rounds, because Tyler, they're like this. First, they're heavy because you're unloading 60 and 81 millimeter, but you had to break this metal off and you had to take your E-tool and break it off. Now, dude, I was literally ready to start crying. It was so painful. I'm like, I said to myself, I think I said to Bill when I saw him, I go, I wish I was on the fucking mortar hike. I'm in so much pain right now, you know?
He's like, I'm gonna do you a favor, and you're like, fuck you, that favor sucked.
No, Bill didn't know, man. Bill's good people, bro. He's an
I got
awesome
you.
guy. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, perfect. Well, I'm ready. If we're ready, I want to talk about the Baghdad Shuffle, and I'll put this on a little bit better. But you describe it as a military thriller that's really a crime novel, and you said that before I started reading it. I couldn't agree more. Can you just talk about what that was like for you, the writing process? I mean, as much as you want, because I want to dig into a little bit more. But it really is a combination that I don't think I've ever read this way. But
Yeah, that's so one of the kind of the heaviest impressions coming out of Baghdad in '03 was just like, man, combat zones are a very fertile ground for criminal capers, right? Like because it's just like it's lawless, right? All the chaos, like the all the kind of social structures break down. So like I say, it's all bad dudes and blood feuds and looting and whatnot. And so in the second chapter of Baghdad Shuffle, there's a scene in there that's basically like a bank heist.
Yeah.
And this is after Saddam has already like hightailed it out of the regime has kind of collapsed. The Marines have just rolled in. Marines and Army have just rolled in, and that actually was a thing. So we were on patrol in Baghdad, and it kind of got some word. I can't remember if it was one of the Iraqi cops that was with us, or somehow we got word that this bank was getting hit, and we rolled up on it, mid heist. And these dudes were, no kidding, using like RPGs to try to blow down the outer. I don't think they ever actually breached the vault, but they just took out like one of the no shit retaining walls, but on the outskirts of the bank there, and we're like going in just rifling. So of course, we get in a gunfight there, chase those guys away. And I didn't learn until actually like probably a year later or so that there actually still was a lot of cash, right? So there had been some skim off of the oil for food program, which was so after Desert Storm in '91, there was basically like a agreement that allowed Iraq to sell a certain amount of oil in exchange for kind of like foodstuffs and other things that would keep the society from just collapsing completely. But of course that, once you start getting commodities involved like that, there's gonna be all kinds of illicit finance associated with that. So there's a lot of hard currency that flowed back into Iraq that wasn't supposed to. And I don't know if that bank that we saw the heist at was actually one of them, but there had been some indications later on. And there's a lot of journalists have covered this, after the fact as well. But the regime guys didn't necessarily make it out of Baghdad with all that cash, right? So a lot of that stuff was still back there. The bearer bonds part in the book, that was just purely me. I don't know if any of that existed. Just like all the fun, crime movies of the 80s and 90s always involved bearer bonds. So
it made sense. It made sense to me, but yeah.
That was also kind of like the end of the era when those things were actually still like in circulation, I think, from globally. Like that was before there was a lot of the financial controls on cracking down on a lot of that. But anyway, yeah, so that was inspired, that bank heist kind of inspired the like kind of the genesis of the crime aspect of the novel. It was like, okay, you got these desperate Iraqi guys, former intelligence regime officials, former Republican Guard guys, and they're looking for that golden parachute, right? So how do we get the money out of Iraq to wherever we're going to set up shop, whether it's other places up in the Levant, like in Jordan, Syria, whatever, other places in the Middle East, some of them back in the United States. Because there's been a fairly large Iraqi diaspora, like especially in Southern California.
I didn't know that.
A few of them who even like maintained regime ties. So there were some folks like right after Saddam took power in the late 78, 79, whenever it was, he came in. They had pushed some folks like into the States, basically as not really like in a sleeper aspect, but they still had kind of like a tenuous relationship with the regime, right? So they had folks just kind of out and about, and so that was kind of from the narrative standpoint, that was kind of the connection, right? It's like, okay, these guys are trying to get that money out of Iraq and then back into the U.S. so that they could, where they already have kind of like an expat community to some degree that's set up that they can, if they play their cards right, blend back into and have the money to kind of live that life. So that was kind of, and then the protagonist, Jim, the Marine infantry guy, he just kind of stumbles upon this, right? And so that's the Fouad character in the book. That was based on another real guy. And it was a dude that just approached us so that very first scene in the book when they're at the church, it's like a Catholic church that was serving as like a hospital at the time. And these nuns were patching up all these Iraqis that had been shot up during the day. This car came in with 2 guys, and the nuns wouldn't treat them. And so we knew right away, like, okay, that's like,
That's
these
weird.
guys are bad news. If like, if the nuns aren't gonna, they're gonna literally deny them medical care, and they're gonna just die right here on the doorstep of the church. Like, these dudes are definitely mixed up in with some bad stuff. And then this guy, the Fouad character, like the dude in real life, just appeared, and he's like, hey, I know a hospital. You can follow me. We'll get them taken care of, blah, blah. And then I just kept randomly running into this dude. Like, over the next couple of weeks we were in Baghdad, he would just show up. So looking back on it, obviously, I think, this dude was in the game. He definitely was. Yeah, exactly. He definitely was scheming. I didn't know what, he actually did give us some lead. He put us onto a couple, like, weapons caches in the city and stuff, which is good. But I was an infantry guy. I wasn't an intel guy. I had no idea about like how to vet people or try to ops test them or anything for any kind of. So he could have been leading us into ambushes, and we were weary of that aspect of it. But at that point, we were kind of kings of the city, just rolling heavy. Like, we were almost like, okay, that's fine. Like, you kind of like what Adam was talking about, like the chum in the water or the bait op. Like, if this guy's gonna try to lead us into an ambush, at least we'll find people that are bad dudes, right? And we can shoot them. So that was so that character combined with the bank heist, combined with the fact that former desperate regime guys trying to get money out of it. Like, how do I kind of craft that all into a thing? Yeah. Into a cohesive, compelling narrative that would drive a plot that would allow that Marine to then be jammed up in those same circumstances once he's back in California.
Well, and I want to get to the Hawala banking, but I have a question because I didn't realize this was something that happened to you, but in the book, I actually flagged it. There's a part where a shooting took place that was captured on media, and the media in the book, we'll just keep phrasing it that way, edited it in a way that made it look like Marines were just shooting unarmed people in the streets. And the character was like, no, he was fucking armed. He had an AK. He was going for the AK. That's why I did. Was that something similar to what you experienced in real life? Because I do recall seeing that come out after the war. I mean, I was young when the war started, and anyway, but it resonated with me.
Yeah. So that was based on a real event. So I was talking earlier about kind of getting jammed up when I came back for what a quote unquote bad shoot that was captured by the CNN guys. Yeah. And again, just to clear the air, like the CNN crew we had with us, they were good dudes. It wasn't them. It got leaked otherwise. Yeah. But I did kind of dirty them up in the book a little bit to make it, to kind of drive the narrative
Dramatic
there.
license, man. Dramatic license.
Dramatic license, exactly. Yes. And yeah, actually, I think that clip is still out there on YouTube. You can see like the edited version, and it does look bad. The way it's this guy that's already been hit, and he's like trying to like push himself back up to his knees, and one of my Marines plugs him again with a pretty impressive offhand shot, I might add, and drops him, and then the Marines are like laughing, right? Because they're just like, oh shit, that was like you got him, and so it comes off a little callous and maybe a little like thrill killish, but it really wasn't. I mean, the problem was like those 2 guys, they were both armed, and they wandered in. We didn't have comms with the other company that was moving, and I was worried they were gonna like basically be able to like hit them from that company's flank. And because I couldn't warn the other company, we decided to go ahead and drop them right there, even though it was going to give away our pause. But we did, and in the Marines, like I say, it was a pretty impressive display of marksmanship. Yeah, took those guys down, and then that one dude started to get back up and got plugged again, and then that's when the Marines started cheering and laughing, and that's the only part you really see on the video, right? So it's not as good, but yeah, so that was part of it. I decided to incorporate that as well into the narrative there.
Well, I'll tie it in a little bit, just a personal story as well that I experienced. Nothing the same. I am not comparing myself to being in combat. That's not the purpose of it, but just selective editing and not understanding what's going on. But I almost got jammed up. There's this guy in Hillsborough who still does it to this day. He has a channel. I'm not going to put it on the show because he can kiss my ass. But he likes to try to catch cops speeding, driving with their lights on, and he follows them. And the intent behind his channel is to just be like, oh, they're reckless, they're doing whatever. Well, I got on that video and I got on his channel, and it got back to the headquarters in the brass, and it shows me with lights and sirens, booking ass, slowing down, still running lights, and then getting behind a car, getting out, doing like one of these things, and then kind of chopping it up and then ended up laughing and leaving. And that's what's on the video. So it looks like I'm just hauling ass to catch up with a buddy. The call was kidnapped individual. I need backup, possible domestic. I don't know what's going on. Hauling ass. We're trying to back this dude up because we don't know what the fuck's going on. Hey, everyone slow it down. Misunderstanding. Everything's, I'm clear. And so you can see the progression of what I'm doing in the video. And I'm like, dude, you said it was a fucking kidnapping and a domestic. And he's like, dude, they were arguing, but it's not like that. It's fine. Everything's cool. And I'm like, And so then, but you see but because I was there, but the way he edited it and then his articulation in it, dude, they were going to, I could have potentially gotten fired or suspended or whatever, but I had to explain myself. But I'm like, God damn, bro, like these people have no idea what we're doing. And yet you're out here just, throwing commentary out, getting all these clicks. That's why it resonated with me. When I read that in the book, I was like, bro, I fully fucking understand. I mean, again, not comparing the two. Yes. Drives me nuts. So
Clickbait.
Oh,
Clickbait.
dude, I fucking hate it. Anyway, I hate people that, if you don't know, people do dumb shit, fine. They should get called on it. But if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, then anyway, whatever. Moving on from that. I don't want to get out of diatribe. All banking, because I have heard of it. I've learned of it. And then you were like, bro, yeah. And you talked about it in the book. And I was like, dude, I had to go Google it one more time. But could you please, from your perspective, articulate it and why well, I don't want to say you wrote the whole book around it, but it's a main part of the first book anyway.
Yeah. So again, and I'm not like an illicit finance, expert by any means, but it's essentially, Hawala is it's essentially an informal remittance system, right? So it's a kind of like, you say it's kind of like the underground Western Union of being able to, wire money without wiring money, right? Because the money's not actually moving. So it's essentially, it's a series of ciphered ledgers that are kept on both ends so you can deposit money in one place and pick it up in another without ever actually having to.
It's old school, baby. That's old school.
It is super old school. Been around forever.
Yeah.
And it's, and especially at that time, I mean, there was probably I'm sure the FBI and a few of the folks in the U.S. intelligence community were pretty hip to it by 2003. But on the military side, we really weren't, right? And I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about it during that deployment. It wasn't until my next deployment in 2006, I think, when I started working some counter-threat finance stuff, that I got kind of exposed to the machinations of the Hawala world. But I thought it made for like a cool kind of plot device, right? Because it's not something that's covered in a lot of Western crime literature or military thriller stuff. There is a few, actually. Phil Halton, who's a former Canadian Army humaner, he's written a couple of really cool novels that take place in Afghanistan pre-Soviet invasion in the 70s that have used Hawala. But yeah, it's just not something that's widely known or widely discussed. And it's a little bit of no spoilers here, but it's a little bit of a red herring in the sense of how it goes into the plot. There are some limitations to Hawala as far as how much money, how much the volume and whatnot can actually be moved and where and how it's retrieved. But again, it's writing from the perspective of the protagonist doesn't know this, right? So he's kind of blind to it too. So he and a lot of the other law enforcement folks that get wrapped into the second and third part of the book are trying to figure all this stuff out, right? So, but it's kind of it's a viable thread to pull, essentially, kind of within the broader criminal conspiracy of the book.
This wasn't on the it's something we talked about talking about, but just for both of you, Adam, you and Josh, but you guys talk about all the training and the field training. Did you guys get any training or briefs on what to expect, what to look for that might be important to the intel community or military, or was it just hey, you're learning military stuff so you can defeat the enemy? Well, let me just phrase it that way.
Yeah, I didn't get any really specialized what we call site exploitation training until much later. For the invasion in 2003, most of that stuff was just focused on keeping your Marines safe, right? Basically searching for booby traps and that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't have a good sense as an infantry guy of hey, these are the kind of things that the intel folks can really drill down on and things that are worth collecting, right? Bringing back. We didn't have any real on the military side. There was really no cohesive biometric program going back then. So even things like fingerprinting and all that, we didn't really do any of that at that point. We did, a couple of years down the line, all that started.
Yeah.
But at the time, there wasn't much of that going on. I mean, there may have been in some of the top tier units and stuff doing that kind of stuff, but not.
Yeah,
I think Adam could back me up on this. 1-7, we weren't doing that. We were just making sure, like, hey, there's nothing here that's going to blow us up or hurt the Marines.
Basically, like, yeah, don't make sure nobody gets hurt, this and that. And, if you find a weapons cache, you can move it. If you got to call EOD, blow it in place. I mean, we did find, like, and probably you did, Josh, too. I mean, we would find buildings, like, the most, like, it was very, like out in the open stuff, like maps with military symbols and pictures and stuff like that. Like, but, we just box it up and bring it back, and battalion took it and never to be seen again. Probably in, like, the warehouse from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the Ark of the Covenant is. Probably still sitting there,
Well, because reading this book got my mind flowing, and I'm like, because you were talking about the boring administrative part, but feeding the machine. Like, imagine if you could do it all over again, and you were like photographing, fingerprinting. You had an idea what you were searching for, because much like, I guess this is what it is, but like the Holocaust and stuff, because it was so old. Like, people are like, it can be so long ago that people are like, did that really happen? Is that real? What was the reason? Why did we do that? That kind of a thing. You can go in and say, look, this is documented evidence of why, and these are the people that were involved. And you know what I mean? Like, you can begin to build a database and a case to justify what's going on, but also, I mean, still be used to this day. Like, I don't know, it spurred my mind going, dude, if the amount of data and intelligence, that could have been collected that might be lost forever or is lost forever. Anyway, it stirred my mind in that way, in the investigative side, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there was probably a lot of like missed opportunities there, in that sense. But you got to remember, there wasn't even really like there was no like headquarters to send it back to, essentially. Yeah. I mean, not in those very early days. I mean, we were literally just like living out of the gun trucks or the tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
Everything was mobile. Like, the command post was a jump. Everybody was like, there was no, it probably wasn't until maybe like late April or early May. I think that's when the division finally kind of established like the headquarters down to Babylon, or it was right around that time frame, maybe well before we went back down south to Najaf, where some of that stuff finally kind of came around, where there was actually like I mean, you got to even have things as simple of like, do we even have a table to get the intel analyst specialist around to be able to like sort through this stuff, right? Like, 'cause they're all moving, like they're on the move the whole time.
We had nothing, man. It was like nothing.
That's true too, because I just did a search warrant a little bit ago, and I mean, my God, we collected I don't know, trash bags full of evidence and stuff, and I'm like, go deal with that somewhere else. But I'm thinking, like, you're doing an invasion of a country for terrorism, financing of terrorism, all this stuff. I'm like, in my mind, again, only through the course of reading this book, I started thinking in this way. I never thought about war in this way. I was like, dude, that would be a monstrous task to deal with. But Adam, do you ever think back and think about that kind of shit at all? Or you're like, this never crossed your mind?
Since you've been bringing that, I'm thinking about that, and like Josh saying, like, yeah, we did. Like, the only thing we were looking for was like a box that said like, VX gas or something like that.
Yeah,
or like,
yeah.
Like that. Like, I'm thinking back now, like, we never thought to like look at like financial stuff, or like, Josh, like think like we never thought like like no one ever told us, like when we were out on patrols or something like that, if you guys come across like oil stations, like, mark it on the map, take pictures and see if it can be rebuilt for like what it would like, so we can get people out there for, getting the government back up. Nah, man, it was like Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. Like we went in, it was like, we're going to fight, we're going to like get them to surrender. If not, we're just gonna like destroy the Iraqi army and get rid of the regime. But like, you can see, and like, I don't know about you, Josh, but like, like it took a couple of years, you realize it, like, you're like, man, maybe we shouldn't have had de-Baathified and dissolved the Iraqi army and stuff like that. We should have maybe okay, bro, we got the country. Let's take a step back right now and be like, let's see what the infrastructure is. Let's get these army guys in like a holding camp, or like, hey, turn in your weapon and go home, and we're gonna get a roster. But like, nobody really knew what they want. It was kind of like nobody really knew what they wanted. Like the military, like I would say now it's better at that, but I don't know. But like, it's like, okay, we're like, it's not like we had to like, our mission was to go in and topple the Saddam regime. After that, it was like
just freestyling.
Okay, yeah, that's it, man, freestyling. And like
try not to let people shoot each other. Like, it was like, out of control.
Josh, do you remember like the looting in like a couple days after we got to Baghdad, like those 2-3 days?
No, big
looting?
time. Yeah.
Tyler,
Yeah, we were getting like running gun
they
battles with these
looted
guys that were
Baghdad.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
revenge killings, looting, like all that
yeah.
was on the table.
It's like
Like
the purge.
Yeah,
I
essentially.
tell people that the looting in Baghdad, Iraq in 2003 puts the people from the 92 LA riots to shame what they did. These people, I'm telling you, and I understand like why they did it. They had nothing. They were oppressed by the regime, but they took like the light switches, the sockets out,
Yeah.
everything, man.
Yeah.
Logistically, their ability to like strip mine and just like yeah, just the scale of the looting from a logistics standpoint was mind-boggling. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of impressive in that sense. But
Yeah, like I mean, you were like, oh, someone's like, go check out the Ministry of Water. You get there, and it was a concrete building with nothing, nothing, like no light switches. Like maybe there was a wire hanging out. The doors were gone. Like I'm like, holy shit, dude. Josh, I don't know if you ever did it, but remember we had a pull security at that ASP down in An Najaf.
oh yeah,
And,
yeah, I
and
remember that one well.
it was this massive, like it was, I think like it was like this massive ammo supply point, Tyler, where like the Iraqi army like there, but there was a fence around it. There was because they took all the chain link fence off of miles of it, miles of it.
Wow.
It was gone, and we would
Yeah.
catch them. Um, Looting, like, but they weren't taking like, this is 2000, this is like April, May, June 2003 time frame. Insurgency was like maybe like a bubble in the pan, and we would catch them. They weren't taking tank shells and stuff. No, they were like these buildings. They were like taking the metal out of them to use for their houses and stuff like that. They didn't care about like tank rounds and rockets and shit like that. They wanted the wood boxes that the tank rounds came in for like
Yeah.
firewood and shit.
Yeah, it was wild for sure.
Yeah, it was the Wild West, and I brought it up to you, Tyler, and Josh can second this. It was the Wild West. Like we were operating out there with not a lot of like really a clear mission. And this is not negative on anybody in the Marine Corps, or this is more like the civilian leadership and the State Department. We weren't really operating on a clear mission, what the hell we're supposed to be doing. But the discipline of the Marines was like, everybody got up and did their job every day. They're like, all right, we're going on patrol. Like guys bitched and moaned because if they're not bitching, then they're definitely not grunts. But they did their job. Guys would be like, hey sir, what are we doing? I'm like, I don't know. We're going on patrol. We're gonna make sure we're gonna find some weapons and do stuff like that.
Yep.
Well, what happens after that? I'm like, we'll come back and I didn't want to say like, your guess is as good as fucking mine. you know.
Yeah, we're gonna go on patrol, and if anybody shoots at us, we're gonna shoot them, and then we're gonna try
Yeah,
to
that's
keep them
it.
from killing each other.
I go, listen, if somebody shoots, and I'm thinking in my head, and I'm not thinking it negatively. I'm like, all right, please let somebody shoot at these guys so these guys can get some more trigger time in, and so they're happy and they're not like like sweating because the generator doesn't work and the AC goes out every 13 seconds.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like even from just a procedural standpoint, talking about like some of the missed opportunities. I remember there was this little village down south in Najaf. We called it Vietnam because it looked like Vietnam had literally like date palms and stuff. Like it was right along the river. And we were trying to basically kind of do like a low key census there. So we were trying to develop what would be the equivalent, I guess, in policing of like a FI card. For these guys down. We didn't even have like a digital camera to do that with, right? Like there was of course there was no national identification. People dumped all that by then. So
Yeah.
even for this small little village of like 30, 40 people, just trying to do FI cards on people so that we could track like when they were in the area and stuff. Like we didn't even have like the rudimentary tools to even do something like that. So
yeah. And
But-
Josh, remember, like we couldn't even like a lot of the translators we had were like, it's not that they couldn't be trusted, but they definitely had like some of them had ulterior motives for being there. Like I'm talking about the ones from the United States, like because they were like, because they were getting paid. I can only imagine, man. They were getting like Blackwater money back then, if not more. But like you couldn't get Josh, do you remember? Be like, hey, ask this guy here where so and so is. It would be like a 35-minute conversation. Like, what's going on? He goes, no, he doesn't know him. I go, oh, what the fuck else did you guys talk about?
yeah. Yeah, I think we had the entire population of Dearborn, Michigan out there with us for a little while.
Yes.
They were
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
it was all the Shia dudes that had left like after Desert Storm, right? They were coming back and like, yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I imagine, yeah, they probably had some scores to settle while they were there. But yeah, it was interesting times for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Just the sheer, I try to talk to like guys that deployed even like the next year. I mean, we used to go on like me and Jimmy Birchfield and stuff. We would go out in like a Datsun in like half civilian gear, like this old pickup that we like a Datsun pickup that we'd gotten off the lookup. No, not even radio comms with battalion, and going like way outside Najaf, maybe over to like Al Kufa or like other areas down south to go snatch guys when we were doing like these hits on these little, and like, yeah, no comms, no worry about IEDs, like none of that, right? It was just a
Nothing.
completely different world
Remember,
until about like late 2003, early 2004. That whole kind of environment had completely changed where like you weren't doing that. So it truly was the Wild West at that point.
yeah, Tyler, they were making us, Josh, I don't know. I don't know if you did many foot patrols, but like when we were doing foot patrols, because we got rid of our tracks and we had like a few Humvees and 7 tons, like they wanted us with our soft covers on. We'd have boonies on and everything. We didn't have gloves. We didn't have iPro, none of that shit. They wanted us to be like, they wanted us with our armor on and our weapons. We were condition one and everything, but like they wanted us in there with the population, showing them that we're like, peaceful. Like literally what, like, Josh, 8 months later, like it was a
Completely different ballgame. Yeah.
yeah, raging insurgency. I mean, like I remember the Marine Corps at that time, like 2-4, like in February, March timeframe, they lost like 12 dudes in one day. They lost like 7 guys in a Humvee, got hit by a Dishka, like a 12.7 millimeter, like a 50 cal. Like dudes were getting like it was like Josh and I, like we had the initial combat, but then it was like, like we could have probably went and ran out in town, like, did like unit PT or something and nothing would have happened. But like then it was like you guys, you're not going outside the gate without a patrol plan. Everybody's in full armor. You got to make sure the QRF is ready. Now we had QRF and all that stuff, but it was not in a bad way, but it was like a laid back attitude kind of. We're like, all right, this is cool. And then, we realized that it was just like, I remember, Josh, who was our OPSO?
Major
God,
McDonough.
Yeah. He was an instructor at TBS when I was there. Major McDonough. He said, really smart guy, thick Boston accent, really, really good guy, really smart guy. I remember him saying, he's like, Mac, the way you really look at it, like unfortunately in Iraq right now, it's like, you had the Sunnis who were in like that small sect of them, the Baathists were in charge. Now the Shia are here and they're trying to come and do stuff. But the problem is it's like they've been living in a closet. They've been shoved in a closet for the last 20 years or 30 years. And they don't even, like, he's like, they don't know how to brush their teeth. Like, he was using that as an example. They don't know how to do anything. And now we're turning everything over to them. And, that's part of it. It was, I mean, like literally a 6-month, 8-month difference. Like the insurgency was just like it was like here and then it just went here and it was bad.
Yeah. Well, so you talk about, and I think it ties into the book because you talk about working with the Iraqi cops. And I know there was a transition period, but could you touch on that and then how it relates into the book?
Yeah,
I'm fascinated with working with foreign law enforcement, but I've only ever worked with, it wasn't a combative country. Let's phrase it that way.
Yeah, it was a real quick time frame there. Like we had rolled into Baghdad and maybe I think it was like the second or third day we were there, a lot of the heavy shooting kind of died down. And that's when some of these dudes came out of the woodwork. And the first one, it was the one I sent you the photo of.
Yeah.
It was an Iraqi police officer and then like 2 of his subordinates. I think Ahmed was his name, if I remember correctly, Captain Ahmed. But he had kind of approached us, right? Like, I don't think it was maybe at a vehicle checkpoint or I think it was while we were actually on patrol. I don't remember the details exactly. But then he was like, hey, there's some drama. Like he's like, I know where things are going down right now, but we don't really have the ass to do it ourselves. This is all through like broken English a little bit. I don't even think we had an interpreter with us, but that guy did speak some English. Again, looking back on it, probably dangerous on my point. Like, okay, let's do it. There was no like vetting this guy's story or nothing. It was just like, he knew people were being victimized. He knew what was going down. They just didn't have the people to do it because it was like him and 2 of his subordinates. So yeah, we rolled with those guys for like a couple days and just got into all kinds of craziness with them. So yeah, busting up. There was a lot of revenge killings and stuff going on, but like catching dudes that were trying to kidnap people and like a lot of the looting. They were the ones that I think they were the ones that eventually clued us on afterwards to some of the people they thought had hit that bank with the RPGs and whatnot, where those guys had been holed up, after the heist. I don't think we actually ever ended up catching those dudes, but yeah, it turned us on some weapons caches, some other stuff. So, but unfortunately, that only lasted, and this is before the Coalition Provisional Authority had even like set up shop. Ambassador Bremer was not even in Baghdad yet, but even before the general order came down, the debathification piece, where all the former regime guys are no longer allowed to carry weapons, they can't they can't serve in those security force roles anymore. Even before that, we had kind of lost contact with those dudes. So some of them just got out of Dodge. I think one of them took off like to go with relatives way out west or something. That's what the other guy told us. But
Yeah.
yeah, they just kind of like blended back into the environment, right? So it was maybe only in retrospect, it was maybe just a couple days where we were actually working with those dudes. And we had no comms with them. Nobody had sat phones. They obviously, like, the cell infrastructure in Iraq was fairly limited to begin with, and then completely not operable by the time the war kicked off. So it was literally like meeting guys at like checkpoints and stuff to try to figure out what was going on. There was no like established comm plan really with anything. It was a lot of just, we're running the streets same times they're running the streets, and hey, let's try to work together.
So I worked with some, I guess, they were the Secret Service of Honduras, and we were, again, chatting through the apps and stuff. And basically what I gleaned was anytime a new president was elected, that new president would basically fire. When I say get rid of, they didn't kill him, but get rid of and bring his own security because they didn't trust him, I guess, either assassinate him or undermine him. So basically each presidency in Honduras has their own regime of protection and security. Was it that kind of police, or what kind of police was it like Saddam's police, or was it like Iraq? I'm trying to understand the difference.
Yeah, and honestly, like I wish I could tell you, like I said, we didn't vet these guys at all, right? So where they kind of fell out in the table of organization of Iraqi
Fair enough. Yeah.
law enforcement. But I will say they seem to have, at this point, we were operating over on the eastern side, like over towards like New Baghdad quite a bit.
Okay.
There was a heavy like Shia population there, and the locals weren't really treating them like they were the oppressor. So they had actually had, like I said, that's how they had some suction with the locals to be able to know like when some of this stuff was going down. Right? So I don't know. I never asked like what their religious affiliation or like, kind of if they were like card carrying Baptists or anything. Didn't care. They were willing to help and kind of, or willing to have us help them try to restore some level of order out there.
Okay.
And like I say, like most of the population seemed appreciative of their efforts actually to try to like keep things as peaceful as possible, but we got overwhelmed. It didn't last long, and then those guys one by one kind of dissolved back into the landscape, never to be seen again.
How did that experience tie into the book and the individuals that are listed in there? Again, you share as much as you want. I'm not trying to spoil it, so you can talk about as much as you want. I don't want to be the one.
So getting away from not going down spoiler street, but the one of the main bad villains in the book, the Azat character, essentially is impersonating a cop, right? So he's because I thought about that afterwards. I was like, these guys that we worked with, like,
that's what
they could have been bad dudes. Like we have no idea, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, exactly. We have no idea. They had the uniform, a couple of them had those old like Ural, like the Russian motorcycle, like the police bikes and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of that was the inspiration for on the fictional side of it, was that. Looking back, like those guys probably duped me, or may have. Like I have no idea if they were like legit cops or not. They seemed to know the gig. They knew the beat. Like the populace like understood. The citizens knew who they were, and like so I think they were somewhat on the up and up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, does that mean that all of them that we interacted with, there could have been guys that were like on the deck of cards somewhere, that were donning the police uniform and trying to blend back into that population. Who knows? We just did not have kind of like the analytical clarity at that point to be able to determine who was who in the zoo. So we were just kind of working with whoever. But that's essentially how that informed the Azat character in the book. Was like, yeah, he got away. That was his freedom of movement through the city, was because he was impersonating a Baghdad policeman.
Adam, what about you? Did you have any experience with working with local military PD? I don't know how to.
Yeah, I worked with the local cops there in Baghdad and a little bit on the Jeff, and I think they were like Baghdad PD. I mean, I don't know, like Josh said, I don't know.
It's so interesting.
They were, because I think we let them have their handguns, right, Josh? I think we.
Yeah, they had the like Makarov, like those Russian pistols. We let them carry those.
Or like the Russian or the Iraqi Beretta, like they had a version of.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
And they seem, but what Josh brought up about like, you didn't know if they were Sunni or Shia, but I remember a lot of people in Baghdad were like, they didn't really say, I'm Sunni, I'm Shia. That was like, Baghdad was like, it was very metropolitan and, like more down south is where they were, because that's where more of the Shia was. But like I remember I asked one of our translators, he's like, well, what does it matter if I'm Shia or Sunni? He goes, I'm Iraqi. That's all that matters. And I remember it was positive, like, this is pretty cool. But then, like, like the sectarian violence just filled from that.
Yeah, I remember being shocked at how cosmopolitan Baghdad was, like,
Yeah, yeah.
and just some of the
I really remember being like I remember like when we were driving up north to Baghdad, Josh, and like look, I'm like, holy shit, this country has like legit roads and bridges. Like, I mean, and this is all done on all these years of sanctions. I mean, can you imagine if they never had the Iran-Iraq war, or even never did the Gulf War, and they were able to rebuild? Like, Iraq was like kind of like a shit hot country in the Middle East, man. In all honesty,
yeah. There's a lot of things that surprised me. I remember in Baghdad there was a guitar center. I mean, I think it was like a black market one, but it had like the same like font and everything. Our air officer went and bought like an acoustic guitar, this like guitar center downtown Baghdad. Like what the hell, Like,
was that Geezer or?
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, hilarious. Like just things that I just would never anticipated going in, right? Like that was. So my concept of like how Baghdad as a city, presented was like not how it was and how it turned out being in real life.
Yeah, you were allowed to drink there. Like there was bars, and like
No, we took down that one brewery on the outskirts, like right south, in between Diyala and
yes.
Baghdad. There was that, yeah.
And there wasn't like down south. There was a lot of women wearing the burqa. It wasn't a full burqa. It was like a black one. Like Baghdad, there was like 1 out of every 25 women were covered. Like most of them were just like everyday women, like in the States. And that changed 6 to 8 months later probably. But it was surprising how metropolitan really, and really how nice. Like I always said, it was kind of like sad, like how freaking beautiful and amazing Iraq could have been, like, because Saddam did do, like, I mean, he had health care for everyone. Women served as doctors. And I mean, there was Dr. Jerm was a female chick in the deck of cards. And, America wanted to impose democracy, and well, that didn't work,
Fair enough.
So,
Fair enough.
yeah.
If
The interagency cooperation piece, that was something that in the course of my career, so basically from 2000 to 2022, between the military, between law enforcement, and between the intelligence community, like that got so much better over time. And part of in the book, part of the, like, I'm trying to build that sense of like kind of chaos and friction and blurry jurisdictional lines, and because in 2003, we were 2 years post 9/11 at that point, so everybody kind of come to the realization that, like, yeah, we need to really kind of like try to work, the coordination and cooperation measures could use some improvement, right? It's not optimized. So things were like in play to make that better. But by 2003, that had not really happened, right? And I mean, especially being, just being an infantry guy down on the street level, really had no idea like how kind of how the Death Star worked, behind us, like in the, how it was going down. But then seeing how those things tied out later on, and by my last combat deployment in 2012 and 13 in Afghanistan, I mean, it was pretty amazing, the level of coordination and transparency that we had with, with CIA, FBI, with the League out there, Treasury. In fact, in 2006, we worked a program with Treasury based on, and that was my first deployment as an intel guy, in kind of an analytical role, but there was a lot of heavy fuel oil being basically smuggled out of Iraq from the Beijing oil refinery to a bunch of kind of organized criminal gangs in the Levant, like in Jordan and Syria and stuff. And then a lot of that money that they were selling it for was coming back to finance weapons, for the insurgency, for AQI and all those guys. So we worked at Treasury on that. I didn't even, in 2003, I wouldn't even known Treasury had like analysts. I didn't know that was like even a thing. So just the learning curve was like really fast. But then, I think a lot of we were talking earlier about like in '03, not knowing how to do site exploitation, not knowing from like either an investigative or forensic standpoint, like what people would be interested in or what we should collect. But then before, on my next deployment, we had a very intensive sensitive site exploitation period of instruction from the FBI, where they actually came down to Camp Pendleton and like trained us up on that. So that those kind of things, like the actual, like the repetition of like hard skills and really kind of habituating it into your standard operating procedure, that got so much better over time. But '03 was still the very, very kind of front edge of that wave, right? So like that's one of the themes I wanted to try to get across in the book, was like kind of how chaotic and disjointed and like I said, we're just kind of freestyling at some points, right? There's a lot of people just trying to take personal initiative to make things happen, but not really knowing how the machine worked, up at the national level.
Perfect.
Then moving on to just kind of love-hate thing with Marines, it's hilarious because like coming up, like I've known so many Marines in the Marine Corps like hate the cops, right? Just like, fuck those guys. They get to go home to their bed every night, and then they're jamming me up when I'm on libo for stupid shit, for drinking underage or some bullshit. But then those same dudes, like a lot of them, when they get out, they want to become cops because they get it, right? It's a similar kind of, it's all kind of part of the same game. I think a lot of that, kind of like a lot of the fraternity and a lot of the kind of the vibe from the Marine Corps that can translate to law enforcement. So it makes sense that they want to do that. And then just the personality types too, right? They want to go defend and protect the weak from bullies and whatnot, or they're just looking for, they're just looking for action. There's a lot of that out there. So
yeah, some of my my best FTOs, mentors, whatever, were former Marines that got into law enforcement, and they had that. Kind of what you're talking about. It's like, listen, man, not everybody needs to go to jail. Not everybody needs to have handcuffs. It was almost like it's okay to have a little dirt under your fingernails type mentality. You got to assess the situation before you make that decision. And so when we discussed that, I was like, I guess it does make sense, because on the other hand, Marines are notorious for getting into some shit one way or the other, whatever it is. And something I've been talking to my son about much more frequently now, but I thought that was a funny point. I mean, Adam, you were a Marine and turned cop. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
It's like Josh said, like I never was like, I hate the cops and everything. Like everybody bitch, but the one thing, and I think Josh, you get the guys that guys that were Marines, and they like, the fucking cops, this and that. I got a fucking speeding ticket or this and that. And, they're taking away my rights and everything like that. And I've said, I think I told you this title. I'm like, I go, whoa, you joined the Marine Corps, the strictest of all the service branches, and you're bitching about this. Like, this is where you had to have a haircut every week, even though the Marine Corps order is once per pay period, which is every 2 weeks. But in the grunts, no, if you didn't have a fresh haircut on Monday, you're getting your fucking ass chewed. Those things always amazed me. And I think, like Josh, definitely talking about like interagency and site exploitation. I remember going to Afghanistan in 11 and 12, and they had the law enforcement professionals. They had in the infantry units, and it was more for to build a case against people, but they would give units like these site exploitation bags, and they were awesome. Like, I wanted to steal one and bring it home, but like I would have gotten in trouble. Like, had GPSs, digital cameras, all this stuff for like doing crime scene out in the field. And I remember too that they had the intel section like pushed down at the battalion level. Like they had a CI guy, they had a CI officer and then it was a lieutenant. Then they get replaced with a CI warrant officer. Like, you had like the intel section had their little thing, and they had signals intel on the top. This was when I was with 1-5. It was definitely a lot better. Like, where like everything was like from within the agency was meshing better. Like, Josh got to see, I didn't really see like the interagency like with civilian law enforcement or the intelligence agencies. He definitely was really privy to that. I didn't see that. I mean, it was better. We had like agency guys come down, and they were always cool. They weren't like, don't talk to me, dude. I'm black ops and shit like that. They were like, nah, they're like, hey, do you think we can get some, like, we got to meet an asset so-and-so. Do you think you guys can send a squad out like a couple blocks over, so that like keeps everybody busy while we go talk to this? So it was cool with stuff like that. Yeah. But interagency stuff, like, I mean, Tyler, you've seen it with law enforcement too. It's like, some agencies we work really good together with, and some are just like don't want to play with others and stuff like that. You saw that as a local cop, as I did too. And then as a Fed, some federal agencies would be like, "Yeah, dude, yeah, we'll send our team out to blow that house up for you or hit it." And some other ones were like, "Hey, can I just get one of your coverage forms?" Like, they're like, "No, no, no, no. No, no, no. You put in a TPS, then I'll send it up to the SAC, and then it'll go." A lot of like, and Josh, you hit the nail on the head really earlier in the thing with like, it's all about building relationships and just talking to people and just saying, I mean, what's the worst? You go like, hey, I'm in Afghanistan, or like, let's say we're in Syria, and I say, oh, I'm like, they're like, oh, we got to get this stuff. I'm like, oh, my buddy Josh Bates, he's a CI guy. Let me go ask him. Or I wouldn't tell him, but I just go ask him, be like, yeah, they said that no one's in this operation. Like, or Tyler would be like, you Secret Service, be like, well, DSS is over there. Let's add, like, I remember when I was at the UN, EPD, 2 times they asked me to pre-post for the president and stuff like that. They're like, hey, Do you mind? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, bro. We're all on the same team. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's how.
Well,
That's
yeah, Josh,
yeah.
you mentioned talk about infantry to intel, and it's reminiscent of being like a patrol
Uh-huh.
street cop. There's bigger agencies that have, like, New York has intel guys and all this other stuff, but like, and then going to the Fed side where you kind of like, hey, I've chased the bad guys, I've busted my knees, I've kicked in doors. And then you get to the Fed side, and it's like, listen, we're cops per se, but it's very different. It's everything's a lot slower, more methodical. Like, I remember my BJ, who's been on the show a bunch of times. We would go serve warrants. It was just him and I. But yo, you want to go serve some warrants? Boom, we just go kick in doors, chase dudes through their house, grab them, whatever. And that's what we did. And then I got to the Fed side. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go arrest this guy on a warrant. They're like, whoa, we need an ops plan. We need 35 guys. I'm like, what? I said, I'm just gonna go get him. Like, I'll just grab his ass. They're like, no. And so it's a very different mindset, I guess.
Absolutely. That transition can be jarring, but I think once people kind of accept it for what it is, then you can leverage both sides of that coin to get after the ultimate objectives. So there's
Yeah.
definitely things from my infantry days that I took into casework as a CI guy, and there's definitely things that had I ever been in a position to go back to the infantry side, like I would have been much better at, having been exposed on the intel side for sure.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up by tying into upcoming, because I know this is book one of three or maybe four. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. So like my contract with the publisher with Double Dagger Books is just for this one, right? So but if sales are decent, then yeah, there's at least a sequel and a prequel that I already have kind of mapped out. Started working on both.
Okay.
No real time, no ETA on when those would hit the streets, but yeah. So the sequel takes place really like kind of right after the end. I
Yep.
mean, it's a very deliberate cliffhanger at the end of Baghdad Shuffle, so that one pick up right there. And then the prequel actually jumps back to right before, on the eve of Desert Storm, and it's actually Jim, the protagonist, is his
Ooh.
stepdad.
Okay.
And that's another one, I just think that for a lot of like fiction writers out there, I would love to see more on the military thriller side or the spy espionage
Yeah.
genre. There's not a lot about Desert Storm, right? There's not too many books that are set in that era, but there was some really interesting things that went down, especially in the lead up to that conflict. So that's kind of my call to arms for the other, fiction writers out there. There's a lot of good stuff to be mined there.
Perfect.
Hold
Adam.
on. I got one question for Josh. I'm texting away.
Sure.
I got to go get our neighbor's
He
dog. in a
doesn't
second.
have ADHD, guys. He does not.
Not at all. Never did.
Josh, this is a question. Like, so how long did it take you to write the book? Like when you decided, like, I'm gonna write a book to like a manuscript.
Yeah, so this one for Baghdad Shuffle, because I've been kind of, chewing on the ideas and the themes of that book for a long time, and I kind of had a good idea of like what the plot structure was going to look like. It took me under 100 days from the first day I sat at the computer till I sent a draft to the publisher
Holy shit!
to try to, and again, it was like I don't have an agent or anything, so it wasn't like I was basically cold pitching a publisher, and unfortunately, Double Dagger they bit, and so that was good. And then it was about another, there was a bunch of edits after that, but the first draft that I got out to the beta readers and that I got out to the publisher was under 100 days.
Dude, that's impressive, man.
But well, I mean, the sequel is going to be a lot. That's going to take me a lot longer, right? Because I had basically 20 years to like kind of brood on this one. It's kind of like a band that like they released their first album because it's like they've been working on those songs since they were teenagers or whatever. Now the record label wants the follow up, and you got to do your sophomore album in like 6 months or whatever. It's tougher. Yeah.
And one more question, Josh. Did you do it like all on the computer, or did you, like, I know like Quentin Tarantino, he writes his screenplays with like felt tip pens on legal pads.
Yeah, like longhand. Yeah, no. Like I say, like that's another skill that translated over from my time. The only thing that is not waivable when you lap move into CI Human is the typing speed. So that's they can waive pretty much anything else to get you in, but typing, no, that's non-negotiable. So I can type really fast. So yeah, I just do it all on my. I'm a true Intel weenie in that sense. Like I just do it all on the laptop.
Did you have to do a typing test or something?
Yeah, you do. I think it's like 60 words a minute or something. I remember it being pretty high, and I remember that was the one thing that was like non-negotiable. Because again, in real life, for every meet, you're doing like hours of writing contact reports and IRs and everything. So like, you can't be jamming up the cycle by hunting and pecking out there. Like you got to be able to get that stuff down quick.
I still I can type pretty fast, but I'm still like that. I remember when I was training a guy, Ricky Bobby. His name's Brian Paul, but we call him Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights, 2 first names. But I'm typing up a report with him. He's like, dude, did you type like that? I'm like, Ricky, I'm like, when I went to school, they were still using typewriters. I didn't take typing. I taught myself to type. He was like just amazed that I was like this. But I mean, he's like, you're pretty fast, but it's just, I'm so funny just watching.
Yeah, typing was mandatory. And again, it was on, like on the typewriter or maybe an electric like word processor thing back in high school days. But I'm glad I took that class because it's paid off for sure.
Dude, how do you think you got into the CI then? You know,
exactly.
That's
That was the thing.
Yeah.
Adam, just so you know, editing makes you, well, Josh, actually, you tell me, but it makes you feel like you poured your heart and soul into something. You did like 110,000 words, and you're feeling really good. And they're like, "Hey, this is a good start," and then they just destroy you, and you're like, "Oh, my pride."
Yeah, definitely got to have the alligator skin going in. That's for sure,
buddy. Yeah.
I can't wait to read it, Josh. I'll probably start this weekend, man. And listen, this is the only thing I ask of you. For every book that comes out, I'll buy the copy, but I want a signed copy from you for every one, so I can have a collection. You know.
Sounds good, brother.
Yeah, right. All right, guys. I appreciate you.
All right, good talking
thanks,
to you,
Tyler.
Josh.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, guys.
All right, later, Tyler. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Later, guys.